Welcome to Headline Hub Updates. Subscribe and press the bell icon for more updates. A storm is brewing in the South China Sea. In September 2025, China released a new official map, staking out bold maritime boundaries that now include Panatag Shoal, also known as Scarborough Shoal, as part of its territory. Beijing's announcement of new maritime baselines around this disputed reef has sent shockwaves through regional capitals and the international community alike. The move comes on the heels of a series of tense confrontations between Chinese and Philippine vessels near the shoal. Chinese Coast Guard ships have blocked Filipino fishermen, fired powerful water cannons, and engaged in dangerous maritime maneuvers. At the same time, Beijing has declared the waters around the shoal a new marine nature reserve, further tightening its grip on the area. These actions have triggered strong protests from Manila, Washington, and other capitals. The world is now watching, fearing that the standoff could ignite a larger conflict. The question is no longer whether tensions will rise, but how far and how fast. As the waves crash over the shallow reef, the South China Sea has become the stage for a dangerous new chapter in Asia's power struggle. At the heart of the drama sits Panatag Shoal, a tiny atoll with outsized significance. Panatag Shoal, called Huangyandao by China and Scarborough Shoal by the Philippines, is a triangle-shaped reef just 120 nautical miles from Luzon. It has long been a traditional fishing ground for Filipinos, Chinese, and even Vietnamese fishers. But since 2012, it has become one of the hottest flashpoints in the South China Sea. The South China Sea itself is a cauldron of overlapping claims. China claims nearly 90% of the sea, outlined by its controversial 9-dash line. The Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, and Taiwan also lay claim to parts of these waters. Panatag Shoal is especially prized because it is close to the Philippine coast and lies within Manila's exclusive economic zone, or EEZ. Control of the shoal means more than just fishing rights. It's about sovereignty, resources, and strategic control of sea lanes. The shoal sits along major shipping routes and could be a potential military outpost. For the Philippines, losing access to Panatag is a blow to national pride and food security. For more than a decade, Chinese Coast Guard ships and maritime militia have patrolled the shoal, slowly squeezing out Filipino fishermen. China's release of new maritime baselines is a dramatic step. In international law, baselines are lines drawn along a coast or around islands, from which a country measures its territorial sea, exclusive economic zone, and continental shelf. By declaring baselines around Panatag Shoal, China is saying, in effect, this is ours, no questions allowed. Why does this matter? Because Panatag Shoal is well outside China's internationally recognized territory. According to the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS, baselines can only be drawn around land features that qualify as islands. Most legal experts agree that Panatag Shoal, which is submerged at high tide and uninhabitable, does not meet this test. With these new lines, China is not just enforcing its claim, but also challenging the existing rules of the sea. It seeks to create facts on the water, making its control seem normal and permanent. The new baselines give Beijing a legal excuse to police the waters, restrict access, and possibly build new infrastructure. This legal maneuver is more than paperwork. Why is China pushing so hard now? The answer lies at the intersection of economics, strategy, and law. First, the South China Sea is immensely rich in fish, oil, and gas. As China's population grows and its fishing fleets expand, securing these resources is a top priority. Overfishing and polluted home waters make access to new grounds all the more urgent. Strategically, Panatag Shoal is a choke point. Its location makes it a perfect spot for monitoring shipping lanes and projecting naval power. Control here strengthens China's hand not just against the Philippines but also against the US and its allies, who regularly sail nearby to uphold freedom of navigation. Legally, China wants to rewrite the rules. By establishing baselines and nature reserves, it hopes to create a new normal that future generations and international courts will accept as a fait accompli. This approach leverages gray zone tactics, pushing boundaries without triggering outright war. Finally, as China faces a sluggish economy at home, stirring nationalist sentiment abroad is a useful distraction. The South China Sea is a rallying point for pride, unity, and the projection of Chinese greatness. China's approach to the South China Sea is both hard and soft. On one hand, it deploys overwhelming force. Chinese Coast Guard ships are the largest in the region, often outnumbering and outgunning their Philippine counterparts. The maritime militia, civilian fishing boats acting under military orders, adds another layer of pressure. This hard power is matched by a softer diplomatic push. Beijing talks about peaceful development and offers talks, calling for joint development of resources. It pressures ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, to avoid taking sides, using trade and investment as leverage. China also promotes a code of conduct for the South China Sea, aiming to freeze out external players like the United States. The combination is clever, shows strength on the water but sound reasonable at the table. This dual-track approach confuses rivals, sows division among smaller states, and buys time for China's expanding presence. It's a gamble that so far has paid off. China's latest moves have not gone unchallenged. The Philippines has filed strong diplomatic protests, calling China's baselines illegal and baseless. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has vowed not to yield an inch of territory. Filipino fishermen, backed by government support, are being encouraged to return to Panatag Shoal despite the risks. The United States has repeated its commitment to defend the Philippines under the Mutual Defense Treaty. American warships and surveillance planes have increased patrols in the region. Washington and Manila have also held joint military exercises, sending a clear warning to Beijing. Other neighbors are watching closely. Vietnam, Malaysia, and Indonesia have all criticized China's map. Some have sent their own ships to disputed waters. International organizations, including the United Nations, have called for restraint and respect for international law. Alliances are hardening, and diplomatic lines are being drawn. The situation at Panatag Shoal is not just about maps and legal notes, it's about real people, real ships, and real danger. In recent months, Chinese and Philippine vessels have collided on more than one occasion. Chinese Coast Guard ships have used water cannons against Philippine supply boats, shattering windows and injuring crew members. Filipino fishermen report being chased, rammed, and threatened with arrest. At times, Chinese ships have deployed underwater barriers, blocking access to the shoal's lagoon. Drone footage shows dangerous close passes and aggressive maneuvers. Each encounter raises the risk of miscalculation, escalation, and even loss of life. International observers worry that a single incident could spark a wider conflict. The US and its allies have warned that an attack on Philippine vessels could trigger a military response. China, meanwhile, accuses Manila and Washington of provocation and illegal intrusion. The waters around Panatag have never been so tense. China's latest move is to declare the waters around Panatag Shoal a marine nature reserve. On paper, this sounds like a positive step for conservation. The South China Sea's reefs are under severe threat from overfishing, coral mining, and climate change. But many see the new reserve as a strategic shield for Chinese control. Environmental groups note that China's record on marine protection is mixed. While it bans fishing for others, it allows its own vessels to operate freely. Satellite images have caught Chinese boats harvesting giant clams, damaging reefs, and building artificial islands elsewhere in the region. By framing its actions as environmental protection, Beijing hopes to win international approval and justify its exclusion of Filipino and other Southeast Asian fishers. Critics call this greenwashing, using ecology as cover for expansion. The use of environmental rhetoric does little to hide the real aim: consolidating control over disputed waters and pushing out rivals. The world cares about Panatag Shoal not just because of the reef or the fish. The South China Sea is a vital artery for global trade. 1/3 of all shipping passes through these waters. Oil, gas, electronics, and food flow through narrow straits and around disputed reefs. Any conflict here would disrupt the global economy. The region is also a test of the rules-based order. If one country can redraw maps and enforce new laws by force, the entire international system is at risk. UNCLOS, the main treaty governing the seas, has already been challenged by China's actions. Smaller nations worry that their rights are being trampled by great powers. Freedom of navigation is another concern. The US and its allies insist that their ships and planes have the right to pass through these waters without Chinese permission. Beijing, however, claims historic rights that clash with modern law. What happens at Panatag Shoal will shape the future of international law, security, and peace in Asia and beyond. The showdown at Panatag Shoal is about far more than a scrap of reef. It is a struggle over who controls the seas, who writes the rules, and whose voices are heard. For the Philippines, it is a test of sovereignty and national survival. For China, it is a step toward regional leadership and global power. For the world, the stakes are even higher. The South China Sea is a crossroads of trade, resources, and geopolitics. A conflict here could draw in superpowers, disrupt economies, and destroy the fragile peace that has held for decades. The outcome will send a message. Can international law hold, or does might make right? As tensions escalate, wise leadership and diplomacy are needed more than ever. The choices made at Panatag Shoal will echo far beyond its shallow waters, shaping the fate of Asia and the world for years to come. The world is watching. The future of the South China Sea and perhaps the global order itself hangs in the balance.